Here in Athens, the birthplace of democracy, citizens once gathered with a daring belief that reason, dialogue, and shared responsibility could light the path to a just future. Today, across centuries, we stand at another threshold. Beside us is a new force, artificial intelligence. It carries the promise to help us heal the planet's climate, to secure food and water, to extend health, knowledge, and opportunity to every corner of the earth. At its best, AI can be a force for good beyond imagination. But artificial intelligence is also a mirror. It will not only reflect what we build, it will magnify who we are. If we choose greed, it will deepen greed. If we choose wisdom, it will amplify wisdom. Its reflection will be the measure of our humanity. Like the Athenians before us, we must wrestle with freedom and responsibility. AI can sharpen our ability to listen, to deliberate, to unite, or it can distort truth, fracture trust, and silence the many for the power of the few. Its destiny is inseparable from our courage, our compassion, our accountability. The flame of democracy was lit here long ago, and now the fire is passed to us. Will we carry it into a new age? An age where human and artificial intelligence together advance the greater good of all? At the Athens Democracy Forum, we do not merely begin a new chapter. We step into history's gaze. For what we choose to write will echo far beyond our time.
Since 2000, this is where leaders, policymakers, thinkers, and journalists converge to explore the essence of democracy in today's world. This forum strives to foster dialogue and collaboration on the pressing challenges facing democracies globally. Over the next 2 days, Athens Democracy Forum, in association with Kathimerini newspaper, which is the most prominent Greek newspaper, founded in 1919, will dive deep into the profound questions surrounding AI, but mostly its ethical implications and its impact on governance and society. Tonight, we kick off with a series of thought-provoking presentations and discussions led by some of the brightest minds in the field. Now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Achilles Chaltas, President of Democracy and Culture Foundation, a truly international Greek born in Australia with an impressive global career and a vision for Greece.
Καλησπέρα σας και καλώς ορίσατε στο συνέδριό μας. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Democracy and Culture Foundation and Kathimerini, our partners in this endeavor, we would like to welcome you to the 13th Athens Democracy Forum, annual Athens Democracy Forum, that we convene in cooperation and in association with the New York Times. There is no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that AI is the foremost concern of our times. And this is why we've decided to launch this year's forum with this special module, special and dedicated module on AI, ethics, and democracy. Quite appropriately, next door to Aristotle's Lyceum, and we're probably standing on the ruins of Aristotle's Lyceum beneath us. So hopefully we will draw inspiration from that. For this special module, we're very honored and happy to have Piraeus Bank as our supporter. And we want to thank Mr. Megalou, who will come and speak to us a bit later. But, you know, when there are a few other people I would like to thank before I make some other remarks. When we came up with this idea, we tasked our Vice Chair, Anthony Kefalas, to put together the program along with the Foresight Unit, Mr. Yannis Mastrogeorgiou, and Demokritos Research Center, Vangelis Karkaletsis, to put together a program in collaboration with the Worldwide Alliance for AI and Democracy that was launched at the recent AI Summit in Paris. And since we are going to be talking about AI factories, we're going to be talking about Pharos tomorrow, we're doing this under the auspices of the Growth Fund. And we're very happy to have Minister of Digital Governance, Mr. Papastergiou, that will kick off the proceedings with his remarks after mine. I'm sure that when these people were putting the program together, they had Aristotle in mind. This is something that Stephen Dunbar Johnson, the president of the New York Times, will moderate a panel on later on today, whether Aristotle's ethics are the right ones to apply on AI or not. Perhaps is some other ethics. But Aristotle, I'm sure, I know what he would be supporting. This is a democracy conference, so as Yuval Noah Harari, one of our speakers in a recent conference, alluded to in his new book, Nexus, we as delegates probably feel that we have come here to talk about the survival of democracy, that we have come here to talk about the redistribution of wealth, since inequality is the cancer of democracy. But I think our task is a little bit more daunting than that. I think the reason we decided to launch this year's conference with a dedicated AI module is because our entire political, economic, social systems, perhaps even maybe the fairy tale of religion, as Yuval says, are under collapse, perhaps. So we need to soak in the spirit of the ruins around us and try and come up with solutions. The task is daunting. The task is extremely daunting, not only for us, but the whole world. And as I sat down a few weeks ago to pen my opening remarks, I got sidetracked, as a lot of us do, by AI. I asked a few questions, and I started having this conversation with AI, and I started pushing back, saying, I want you to disagree with me. And it was a very interesting 45-minute, long 45-minute, for AI that's very long. If I didn't rely on AI, I would have spent quite a few hours, maybe a few days, putting my thoughts together. And at the end of that 45-minute conversation with AI, I thought, can you please summarize this for me in 4 minutes? And I'm going to take it and read it to the audience of the conference. So, this is the summary. We find ourselves at a turning point where two powerful forces are colliding in real time: the rise of AI and the state of human consciousness. Much is being said about AI's power to disrupt markets, transform industries, and even challenge the very idea of what it means to be human. But perhaps the deeper and more urgent question is this: as AI evolves, what kind of human beings are we becoming? And what kind of democracies will we choose to sustain? In preparing for this session, I've been in deep reflection, some of it in conversation with an AI system told me. What emerged from that exchange wasn't a script, but something more like a mirror, a reflection of what we as a species are capable of and what we are at risk of forgetting. Right now, it is true that much of AI's development is being shaped not by wisdom, empathy, or democratic values, but by greed, ego, and power. The infrastructure of AI, its data, its direction, its priorities, is largely in the hands of a small set of actors: powerful tech companies, government agencies, and elites whose incentives often run counter to the public good. That is not a conspiracy. It is a structural reality. And in the context of democracy, it presents a serious risk. The risk that power will be centralized, that consent will be automated, and that citizens will be reduced to data rather than dignified participants in public life. But that is not inevitable. There is another way. What if, instead of racing to build machines that outthink us, we use this moment to cultivate the parts of ourselves we've long underused: our attention, our critical thinking, our memory, our imagination, our empathy? What if AI became not a substitute for human intelligence, but a scaffolding for deeper learning, creative dialogue, and collective wisdom? And for me, the crux is here. Imagine a world in which 80% of people were using 80 to 90% of their cognitive and emotional potential, 80% of their brain power instead of the 30% that we use now. In such a world, democracy itself would be transformed. We would not just vote, we would understand. We would not just react, we would reflect. We would not just consume information, we would shape meaning together. This is not utopian. It is a matter of design and choice. AI will not decide our future, but it will amplify the consciousness with which we build it. And that means the responsibility is ours. The task before us is not just to regulate AI, is to reclaim the human spirit at the center of democracy. Can you hear us, Aristotle? to ensure that intelligence, whether human or artificial, serves freedom, dignity, and truth, and to remember that no machine can replace the moral courage of an awakened citizen. Ladies and gentlemen, let that be the spirit in which we begin this year's Athens Democracy Forum. Thank you.
Thank you, Achilles. Now, please welcome Dimitris Papasteriou, the Minister of Digital Governance of Greece, who will share his insights into Greece's digital transformation policy. Minister Papasteriou, when he was elected mayor of his birthplace, Trikala, he promoted smart city initiatives through successful digital transformation.
Good afternoon. I will speak from those micros they usually work. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is a real honor to be with you, even through this short greeting at the Athens Democracy Forum. I wish you every success. With such strong voices around the table, I know the discussions here will add real value. Forums like this matter. They raise the quality of public dialogue, and they also keep democracy alive. We all know the times we live in: wars, climate pressures, deep social divisions. Democracy is under constant stress. Technology cannot solve everything, despite the fact that I do love technology. It's my job. But it can help government work faster. It can make them more open. It can bring them closer to citizens. As long as we remember, technology must remain a servant and not a master. Artificial intelligence is a great test of our generation. It excites us, but it also worries us. It raises questions we cannot avoid: fairness, transparency, accountability, privacy, and above all, how to protect public debate from manipulation, deepfakes, and disinformation. Let's be clear, AI can also be turned against democracy itself. We have already seen in past elections how disinformation campaigns tried to sway public opinion. With AI, the speed and the scale of manipulation become far greater. Deepfakes can now target specific groups. Algorithms can spot the most vulnerable citizens and flood them with false or misleading content. We have seen synthetic videos and voices go viral in minutes, reaching millions of views. Combine that with huge volumes of personal data, and you have a powerful weapon, one that can exploit fears, intimidate people, divide societies. This is not a technical risk, it's a democratic threat. And we know it's not just a theory. We have seen attempts to frighten voters, to push them towards certain choices, and AI can be misused to shake trust in institutions and to silence reasons with fear. That is why ethics and democracy must be at the heart of AI. Without explainability, no accountability. Without accountability, no trust. And without trust, democracy itself is weakened. Ethics are the foundation of our approach, but ethics need to be supported by solid legal frameworks. And this is not a challenge for a country alone, it is a European one. We need to use a robust legal framework like GDPR, Digital Services Act, AI Act, and make it simpler, smarter, and more efficient to address the opportunities while making the EU more competitive in global scene. Elections across our continent must be protected. Citizens must trust that they see hear, and read. That means common standards, shared safeguards, strong cooperation between governments, institutions, and technology companies. Europe can lead here by providing that democracy and innovation that can advance together. In Greece, we are proud of our progress. Under Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis, digital transformation became a national priority. Today, gov.gr and gov.gr wallet serve millions of citizens. Services are faster, simpler, fairer, and that was the first foundation. Now we take the next step, artificial intelligence, always with caution, but always with citizens at the center. 2 years ago, we launched MyGov, My with AI. Gov, the first conversational AI assistant in the Greek public sector. It helps people navigate through gov.gr. It's a practical tool already in daily use with more than 3 million dialogues. We also created My Greece that serves our tourists. We apply AI in health, in prevention programs. Doctors receive better data and patients receive faster answers. We use AI in justice, not to replace the judge, but to support them with better information. We bring AI into education, digital platforms that adapt to the needs of every student, because each child learns differently. Beyond AI, we also build tools of trust. A good example is Kids Wallet. It gives children a secure digital identity with age verification and parental control, but no payments and no commercial use, just protection online. And we look ahead, because AI itself creates new demands for computing power, for secure infrastructures, for trusted environments, and this is why Greece invests, just like Achilles said previously, in Daedalus supercomputer and in the Pharos AI factory, to make sure Europe has the strength to innovate with responsibility and with autonomy. On Thursday, during our discussion with Google's Ivan Kotsovinos and Evgenia Bozo, we will have the very good chance to present our strategy on citizens and especially kids' protection, because we believe that we must and we can protect them. We take advantage of all the good details that AI brings and try to make internet a safer space for everybody. Our compass is clear. AI must protect rights, it must create values, it must keep humans in control, and this is how democracy will thrive in a digital era. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Can you hear me? Oh, fine. Okay, so thank you, Minister. Thank you for wrapping up all the things that Greece is trying to do to embrace digital technology. Tomorrow we're going to have the opportunity to learn more about the Pharos and the Daedalus, the supercomputer. Now, we're excited to hear from Axel Dochet, founder and president of Make.org, the leading European platform for civic engagement and social participation. He's also co-founder of Worldwide Alliance for AI and Democracy, an important global coalition. So, Monsieur Dochet, soyez le bienvenu, Athènes. La parole est à vous.
Está listo. I'm very happy to be with you, and thank you very much to the Democracy and Culture Foundation and the New York Times to organize this wonderful event. And we are very proud to co-curate the AI Ethics and Democracy session with, in partnership with Cathy Merini and supported by Pires. If you are all there, it's because we all know that there is currently a huge fight between models, between democratic models and autocratic models. It's not just theoretical. we are realizing, and we were maybe a bit naive, that democracy is not the direction of the time. It's something to be built. And today, the wind is not going in the right direction. It's not only a theoretical fight, it's a real military and economic fight, and potentially the context on which we will live in the future will be linked to this fight. But we have to be positive. We are in Athens, and Athens in the ancient times showed us that there were always and very often switch between models, and no one is permanent, and democracy is maybe the right to fire people instead to elect people. So everything is now still possible if we want. But today I want to say that there is another fight, and a fight which is much more anxious for me today. This fight is the threat on the election legitimacy. I'm talking here about a very simple point, which is the engine of democracy. Today, because of a huge disinformation campaign from national players or for international players, whether they are states or tech company, there is a huge risk on the legitimacy of an election. If we lose the legitimacy of an election, we lose everything. Maybe for some time there would be what we call a democrature, where there is a kind of a theater of democracy, but the reality is the people themselves are not deciding in common to the future of their life and the future of their children. So when we talk about AI on democracy, we need to make an hyper-focus on these very little things, the permanent legitimacy on the election results. So what can we do? There are basically two big axes. The first one is to practically defend the legitimacy of the election. So that there is a lot of initiatives, and there is a lot of people over there who are launching and running those initiatives to defend against disinformation. It covers the regulation side, the platform regulation, but also a lot of innovation to counter-fire disinformation. It could be a very technical AI innovation, fighting AI threats, for instance. But it also contains the education of voters, and more broadly, the building of the resilience of society. If we really want to maintain the election legitimacy, we need to consider that every citizen is a fighter itself, and is a soldier at the front of this battle, and building the resilience of the society is mainly the main way of addressing this issue. In that challenge, AI is playing a double game. It's the reason of the risk, one of the key drivers of the risk, but also there are a lot of positive initiatives of AI that can counter-fire this risk. However, there are also a second way of addressing this issue. When we talk about election legitimacy, we are under what we call the institutional democratic processes. Democracy can exist in many other ways. There could be ways of involving citizens in the running of public policy, in the codifying of public policy. There is ways to involve civilians on both sides of a border to increase the chance of peace building when there is a big conflict. There is new ways to engage citizens into multinational negotiation at a UN level, at scale. There is many ways to expand democratic principles. And in that field, AI is playing a fantastic role. AI allows citizens to access the complexity of the world, whatever be your language or your level of knowledge. AI can also help the participation and the collaboration at scales of millions of people with the World Health Organization to prepare the world to the next pandemic, for instance. So on that new front of inventing new ways of democracies to finally protect institutional democracy, AI can be really useful. That's why we launched the Alliance, the Worldwide Alliance for AI and Democracy, which is gathering 300 organizations, mainly research centers, but also NGOs, institutions, and corporates, into identifying and amplifying initiatives that helps to work on those two fields. I don't want to leave you before telling that Athens showed that democracy was not never given, but was an experiment by itself, an ongoing experiment. So today, and during the 3 next days, we will have one single question, not only one single, but say one question at least, which is, are we there to discuss about protecting what we consider being democracy, or are we there to try to invent what will be the democracy, a sustainable democracy, and a sustainable free will for our citizens? Thank you very much.
I love the remark that every citizen can be a fighter for democracy, because we run in the risk for the machines not just to outsmart us, but outvote us. So, Monsieur Daucher, thank you for your very useful remarks. Now we're honored to have Anthony Kefalas, Vice Chair of Democracy and Culture Foundation. He will focus on the ineluctable connection between democracy and AI. Please, a warm welcome.
Good evening, everyone. I will be the one who will be concluding the speeches and allow you to get into the heart of the matter of our meeting today. I would like to start with an analogy, and suffering from professional deformation as an economist, I want my analogy to be in economics. With some or a lot of simplification, it can be said that in the mid-1960s, economists thought that if they introduced mathematical models into their body of knowledge, they could validly claim that they were scientists, and economics was also a science. This one could call the AI moment of economics. Policies were accordingly designed on the necessary assumptions that humans and markets were absolutely rational. This was the moment when AI was misused by economics. The telos was optimization. For example, stabilize inflation, maximize growth, control fiscal deficits. A precise, technocratic, seemingly objective logic that has led to near disaster because it abstracts from reality, it reduces human beings to data points and societies to homogeneous aggregates. Don't worry, this was what we're still talking about AI. Now, by contrast, and this is what is interesting, political economy rests on the principles of justice, social cohesion, and legitimacy, given by the people's consent. Its telos is fairness and the acceptance that conflict over values is not only intrinsic to social life, but even more beneficial. Algorithms, like economic models, promise optimization through efficiency. It is a powerful proposition, but it cannot be the final arbiter, because optimization has no morality, conflicting values cannot be reduced to a single equation, and legitimacy requires accountable human agents that can carry the ethical weight of their decisions. I do not mean to ignore the beneficial relation between AI and democracy. With its ability to augment deliberation, AI can strengthen democracy through citizen engagement. Tests and simulations conducted by AI can make decision-making even more evidence-based. By increasing administrative efficiency, AI can improve the system's responsiveness and thus people's trust in it. Neither can we ignore, however, the fact that there exists a potentially dangerous relation between the two systems. Briefly consider the following. AI systems are opaque, while democracy requires transparency in order to be accountable. AI thrives on speed and black box predictions, while democracy requires extensive and cautious deliberation. AI can engineer people's choices, while democracy rests on authentic autonomy. To put the argument in a nutshell, on the beneficial side, AI improves inclusion, participation, and learning. On the negative side, it can erode autonomy, equality, and accountability. In my opinion, there are thus three critical issues to consider. First, will democracy remain a system of collective human deliberation, or will it increasingly delegate decisions to non-human agents, thus undermining the values it rests upon? Secondly, will democracy continue to be accountable through transparency, or will it increasingly rely on decisions made in a black box, thus putting into question the very principles of self-government? Third, will democracy continue to thrive on pluralism in perspectives, on compromises, on contradictions, on conflicts, or will it increasingly rely on structured optimization and the lack of antagonism, thus losing its human nature? With generative AI, the demos is automatically redefined. New non-human voices are added, and in the political discourse, the question inevitably arises: who counts the most? Optimization then comes face to face with the issue that in democratic politics, there exists no single best outcome, only contested interpretations of the common good and of good life. Allow me to close this brief intervention with a final, and I'm afraid rather predictable, observation. Democracy can survive only if it is recognized that it alone provides a legitimate arena to settle conflicts. And AI is used only as a tool empowering this fundamental function. Under any other conditions, AI will tend to undermine democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your insightful remarks. It was the best introduction for our first panel tonight. The short and long-term impacts of AI on liberal democracy. It is about the complex relationships between AI advancements and democratic institutions, touching upon the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. We're pleased to welcome our distinguished panelists, Stathis Kalivas, Gladstone Professor of Government at the University of Oxford, and Hélène Landemore, Professor of Political Science at Yale University. Moderating this conversation is Xenia Kounalaki, my dear colleague from Kathimerini. A warm welcome for our speakers, please.
Welcome in Athens and the Democracy Forum, Hélène and Stathis. I hear you were colleagues at Yale, but you told me you started out in Yale in 2009. And I was thinking 2009 was the year, I think, Facebook became big. So we all thought in the beginning, that was a period when we all thought that we will have several Arab Springs all over the world through social media. How wrong we were, of course. My thought is, why, what's to say AI will be any different, Hélène?
Well, first, it's a pleasure to be debating Stathis and to be in Athens. I would say that 2009 was also a year after 2008, which was one of the biggest financial crises, since the Great Depression. And I think that was the moment when only then we started realizing the damage done by globalization. I think we finally came to terms with the fact that the previous 40 years had been to the benefit of a tiny fraction of the population, the 1%, and at the expense of the working class and the middle class. So I think if we had figured that out earlier, we probably would have been less optimistic about the potential of technologies, because technologies do not have an impact independently from the economic superstructures, if you want. And I think that should have given us an inkling of what was coming. It wasn't the Arab Springs all over the place. It was going to be more concentration of power, more oligarchization of our democracies, and more manipulation of the public, unfortunately. I think I was naive too, so I'm not blaming indiscriminately. I do think we were still learning about the impact of policies that had been going on for decades. And I think we have to ask those bigger economic questions if we want to see the potential of these technologies for the better.
What about AI? Stathis, what do you think? Will it follow in the steps of the social media?
I think that's the best indicator we have. What has been the impact of internet on politics? I would say certainly it's not something that has been very positive. 2009 was also the year of the big crisis in Greece, and Greece was a bit like a laboratory case. And I remember very, very vividly how, especially Twitter at the time, became the sort of petri dish for all kinds of extremist ideas, not just gaining traction, but also emerging in the public debate and becoming, to use the term that's overused and not very, very helpful, legitimate. What is legitimacy? Legitimacy is the belief that something is acceptable, that is not out of bounds. And I think the very idea of things being accepted by everyone without questioning has been challenged, not necessarily by fundamental and deep changes, but by the mere belief that they can be, without any negative effect. In fact, with a positive effect for those who undertake that. And I think that's very worrisome, the discovery that ideas that were considered to be marginal because people couldn't put them up front in the center of the debate, suddenly became accepted because they were no longer marginal. And that is the very worrisome thing. The idea, for example, that elections are a legitimate instrument can be challenged very easily. Who's to say that when elections were, the results were actually counted and elections were fair? Everyone can challenge that. And the moment you begin to challenge, nothing stands anymore. So you get into this great disorder situation, which is not very good for liberal democracy.
One could say, though, that AI deepens the open democracy the way you envision it in your book. Like everybody has access to information, it makes voter participation easier. What do you think?
So actually, to pick up on what Stathis was saying, I do think that one benefit of these technologies is that they brought voices on the forefront that were sort of gated out of the picture before. So I think that's how we got Black Lives Matter, that's how we got Me Too. None of that would have happened if it were not for some sort of social media effect, networks, the sort of collective consciousness arising among a generation that decided enough is enough. So that actually is a net good, if you ask me. It creates more diversity and more noise, so it's very hard to figure out where the truth is, and we don't have the gatekeepers from this, the editors of the 60s or this prior world, but we do gain something. It's just we're still figuring out how to manage all of that diversity. And I would say the same thing is happening in a way now. In Nepal, you saw Gen Z sort of ousting all these corrupt leaders. It's partly because of Discord and all these technologies. So there's a lot of bad, there's also some serious good. So how do we channel the good and eliminate the bad? That's the big question.
Stathis, we've seen that we have a problem with broligarchy. I mean, the tech leaders are all male, rich guys, mostly of the same age. Trump supporters, recently Trump supporters, because they're sucking up to Trump, trying to get a good relationship to him and have government contracts. How do you deal with that problem and the problem of diversity and access to information for everybody?
I think when it comes to this question, I think diversity is a bit of a red herring, because what corporations seek is profit. And it doesn't matter whether the leader of a corporation is going to be a man or a woman, is going to be straight or gay, they're going to seek profit. So that's one thing, and there is nothing necessarily bad about profit-seeking enterprises. But where the problem comes is that the technology that has been developed since the beginning of the internet is a technology that is extremely good at generating addiction. People become addicted, and in the process also become extremely willing to be very toxic. I remember when I started using the internet first in the very old times of the early 90s, the late 80s actually. I remember discussion lists, listservs, in which people would come together, students mostly, who had access to internet through universities, and it was very quickly they started fighting against each other. So you could see this element of toxic interaction emerging very quickly. So to go back to Helene's point, you get perhaps more transparency, which very quickly becomes very toxic, which creates enormous disorder, which creates incentives for people to be very destructive and manipulative. And then the question is where that leads us. It leads us to a situation, eventually where the destruction is not easily managed by institutions. And the solution usually is because people eventually seek order and they seek security and safety. It leads to a situation in which you have autocrats promising to establish this kind of order at the expense of freedom. I think that is the danger.
Also, who do you think will be in charge of regulating the AI environment? I mean, will it be the tech leaders, the owners of the platforms themselves, the users, the government, the state, the EU? Who's going to lead the way?
Predictions, it's not my forte, but I think we need some kind of global regulation, which is unlikely to come from either the US or China, which are the big players in this space, because they think they're going to win that race. So they don't want to be, tying their arms in their back. So I tend to think that it's going to come from the losers, which are right now the European Union and whoever wants to forge an alliance with them, because they do have an incentive to sort of slow down these two giants and protect the rest of humanity. So I hope we can forge some kind of coalition of the willing to start something and show by example that AI can be tamed and channeled for good and channeled for workers, the youth, and not just the profit of a few people at the top. Whether it's going to happen, I mean, I wouldn't bet on it, but I think that's the only way forward in a way. And in a way, AI is both the poison and the remedy, because this sort of global coalition at scale like that, we can't do it without that very tool. We need the LLMs, we need the social media, we need these structures. If we go through the usual sort of pen and paper, and legacy structures, it's never going to happen.
Stathis, do you believe the coalition of the willing is a realistic approach or not?
Right now, we're seeing the pendulum swing the opposite way. What we've seen since the presidential elections in the US is, in fact, a coalition between the tech industry and some sort of, whatever you call the name, populist leadership. This is not a problem for autocratic societies in which the state, like in China, has the capacity to mold the industry. And so the European Union, especially given that the European economies are facing enormous challenges right now, and also political challenges, we have elections coming up in which potentially winners may actually overturn a lot of what these values and ideas are. It's not clear to me where this kind of reaction is going to come. There seems to be some affinity between the type of interaction and public debate that in the internet or social media has been spawning, and these kinds of populist leaders. I think here is an example of technology not being just epiphenomenal to underlying structures, but actually creating new realities. And eventually, the pendulum may swing in a different direction, but in between, a lot of bad things may happen. So it's not clear to me how all of this is going to play out.
I think also another problem, because we had the EU law last year, but then again, AI is moving so fast that they have to adjust the law the whole time. I just read a comment by Ursula von der Leyen today, and she said exactly that we have to move very fast, because it's a thing, we have to run to catch it. It's developing so quickly, we can't even get to it. I don't know what your take is on that.
Well, so I tend to think that external regulation is always a bit, indeed too slow and last resort and too crude. There are more ambitious approaches that I don't think anybody is really willing to consider, but we should reform corporate governance so that at the source, you empower engineers to dissent, to voice their concerns, to potentially veto the production of certain, algorithms maybe, or at least sort of have the power to express resistance or something. Right now, there's nothing, because it's all decided at the top by boards of directors who are themselves algorithm optimized for profit. So that's in the design. And for me, there's nothing new there, honestly. I mean, I know you're right, there are some epiphenomenal things, but I think fundamentally it's back to who has power. And we faced that in the globalization period, right? It was the same thing. Corporations are giant algorithms optimized for profit. We know the damage they've done. We've seen very little by way of controlling them and slowing down the process, protecting the losers, etc. So I kind of expect the same will happen with AI corporations. But if we don't touch the power inside them, and also, you need to do it at the industry level, but even just starting at the individual level, like the GAFAMs, all of them, you put a citizens' assembly on top of the structure, for example, or a council of workers or something. I think that would sort of change the dynamic and the pace. But I don't know if the US would ever allow that, because then China would, get an advantage potentially. So.
When we compare AI to globalization, I think there is a net benefit of globalization which at least allowed millions of people to escape poverty.
In China, yeah.
In the developing world. And so the losers are the losers in the developed world, of course, but we shouldn't forget, the positive effect. With AI, it's not clear to me who the winners are besides, the people who gain political advantage out of it, because even the sort of aggrieved people who get a kick out of venting their grievances on social media, I'm not sure that makes them happier at the end of the day, or that they get some benefit that eventually will improve their lives. So it's not clear to me where the balance lies here at all.
Right. Just to clarify, I'm not anti-globalization, no more than I'm anti-AI. I think these are on net good things, but I do think there needs to be democratic control throughout, and we've barely had it.
We saw the example of OpenAI was very interesting, because the board of directors essentially fired the CEO, and we saw how that turned out, with a lot of engineers within the company actually supporting the sort of quote-unquote greedy practices of the CEO.
That is true, but that's why I think you want a sort of citizen jury that represents not just the interests of the workers, because occasionally those are also aligned with profit, but maybe larger, groups of stakeholders that have at heart the interest of humanity.
And one of the most disturbing, perhaps, developments is the fact that chatbots are now becoming segmented. So chatbots are going to develop in a way in which people are going to use the chatbot that corresponds to their biases and their, narrow perceptions. And that is going to make polarization even more extreme, in which people eventually live in the same society but can no longer understand each other because their fundamental assumptions are so different. So the question for me is, who is going to profit from that? Is it going to be tech companies? Is it going to be autocratic governments? A combination of both, or perhaps the machines themselves? I don't know.
What do you think?
So this almost science fictional idea that the machines could take control, actually, if you think about it, again, sorry, I'm obsessed with this, but the corporations during the globalization phase were to be exactly like algorithms who took over the host, the local nations, and like the lobbyists of those corporations sort of like corrupted, or took control or somewhat very much shaped the policies in favor of more and more globalization, and more cheap labor imported from abroad, and outsourcing of production. It looks like the purpose of this corporation became parasitic on the democratic purpose. And so I could see that happening with AI as well, absolutely. They will convince, it will develop its own lobbies to convince government to build more and more giant data centers that are going to consume all the resources. I'm supposed to be the optimist in this conversation, by the way, so I don't know what's happening, but okay, so on the plus side, the more optimistic side, I do think that it's the first time in history that we have the capacity to tap the collective wisdom of the entire planet through these, data sensing tools, through these platforms, through the algorithms. So I think that's an amazing opportunity. If we are intentional about this, we can cure diseases. We can also set up governance structures at the global level that will help us address climate change, that will help us address poverty, inequalities, intergenerational inequities. The sky is the limit. It's just we're not taking the direction at the moment, unfortunately.
I was thinking that leftists very often come across as technophobes, and Trump, like a very ardent promoter of AI, especially in the competition with China. So I was thinking, how will we manage that the right and the alt-right won't hijack the whole AI project, and that the leftists will step in, and take their part in the whole development?
I think that the true divide right now is not between the left and the right, it's between what we may call the moderates, which represent the establishment, the status quo, people in this room, on the one hand, and the people who want to disrupt the process, who tend to be associated with the what we call the far right or the radical right. And essentially, what animates them is the willingness to challenge every fundamental idea about how liberal democracies that underline the assumptions about the operation of liberal democracies. So that is really right now, it looks like the far right is winning, and especially after the presidential elections in the United States, it seems to me that this is going to have a very big effect. Of course, if things go bad in the United States, that could create a reaction, but it seems to me the left is a bit out of the picture, and especially the social democratic left in whatever remains of it in Europe is facing eventually a problem of survival even.
Helen?
I would zoom out of the US case. We're obsessed with the US, but there are very interesting things happening with the left in other countries. For example, in Taiwan. So Audrey Tang, who was sort of started her career as a sort of cyberpunk / hacker. She was part of the Sunflower Revolution. She forged this concept of Gov0. You create institutions that are more efficient and smarter with technology outside of government. It was so good that the product ended up being co-opted by government. She was promoted to Minister of Digital Affairs for 4 years, between 2020 and 2024. And she handled the pandemic, the government there handled the pandemic beautifully, using tools, that sort of digital memes, and to ensure people knew where masks were, to ensure that they trusted the vaccination protocol, to debunk all kinds of conspiracy theories. So I genuinely think that we've got the technology the political institutions create. It's bad when the political institutions are bad, and it's good when the political institutions are good. For example, this fake, what's it called, deep fakes, right? Where in Taiwan, what she did is that she created a deep fake of herself, and then she sent it to the public, explaining what a deepfake was and that she wasn't real, and that this, you're going to receive a lot of those things during the election campaign. And she calls it pre-bunking. It's debunking something, but not after the fact, ahead of the problem. And so you create this enormous literacy in the population in a fun way, in a pedagogical way. And so when the Russian bots come in or the Chinese bot come in, all of a sudden, people are immune. And this is not because they're smarter than Americans, because their government's better.
Another problem, I think, is that it's hugely energy consuming, and it's very bad for the environment. What do you think about that? How is this going to be solved? If we all run around asking ChatGPT on every little detail, where should I have breakfast today, or can you translate this? Isn't this a problem?
Not being an engineer, I cannot really say whether there are breakthroughs coming in terms of making the operation of data centers less energy thirsty. But that reminds us that besides AI, we face a very important problem, which is climate change, and it's something we're very much aware of in Greece. The idea here is to harness the advantages that AI provides in order to find solutions for these kinds of problems, but in between, we make them worse. And so the question is, what is going to be faster? Whether the results we're going to get are going to be more, easier and faster to act on the damage that is being caused. I don't have an answer to that, frankly.
Yeah, I don't have an answer either, but there's a brilliant cartoon by The New Yorker where you see a guy on his lawn talking into his phone, asking ChatGPT, "ChatGPT, why is my electricity bill going up?" Mm-hmm. And in the back, you see this ginormous data center looming over the suburbs, and it is a big issue. It's a big issue, especially the hypocrisy of asking people to make so many efforts in their private lives and private consumption of electricity and water and everything, and then there's completely unrestricted access of these companies to these resources, the pouring of trillions of dollars into things that are going to deplete the planet even more. I think there's a big problem. That's why I think the solution is having more democratic debate about, okay, what do we want out of this technology besides enriching a few, people that are already very, very wealthy.
The problem with democratic debate is when people essentially operate in a sort of addiction mindset or situation. Very often, they understand that what they're doing might be bad for them, but they don't have the willpower and the capacity. That's the definition of addiction, to react. They want more and more of what keeps them and makes them feel happy in the very, very short term.
Yes, but they can decide together, collectively, democratically, through majority rule, etc., to tie their hands to the mast. Schools do that. We kind of like sort of the parents deciding for the children in that case, but you can decide as a society to tie your hands to the mast on some issues. We've done it on plastic bags. We've done it on ozone products. Maybe we can do it with AI. Have a healthy, sustainable use of AI products.
Since you mentioned the unfairness in the access of citizens to AI, do you think it enhances social inequalities, or it just reproduces the current ones?
Again, depending on the political structure, I think it right now it's on track to probably increase those inequalities between those who have access, who understand, who can use it. That said, there were very interesting results coming out of MIT recently showing that the people who benefit the most from having access to a chatbot in their work are the least educated, at least when it comes to, the study is about people in a call center. And the least experienced, the least educated workers benefited the most, their productivity increased by 34%. It was really remarkable, whereas the most experienced benefited not at all. And on average, it was something like 14%. Pretty interesting. So this will lift the sort of bottom of the workforce up to the level of others in a much compressed amount of time. Other results show that it also, when you have something to help you write, you can compress the time that you need to write the thing you need to write, so by 40%, something like that, and the quality increases by 18%. So again, I mean, these are early results. I don't even really know what they mean, truly, but this is interesting conceptually to think that, okay, maybe this can be used to actually lift people at the bottom.
But eventually, the capacity of these tools to do mechanical or repetitive jobs means that humans are no longer needed, which is good because we don't want humans to do jobs that are not really intellectually stimulating, but at the same time we need to find jobs or an occupation for people who are going to be displaced. So displacement is one issue. Another issue is, there are again studies coming out of MIT, very early, of course, but showing that people who rely very much on chatbots display a sort of reduction in their cognitive capacity. Mm-hmm. And then, the thing that is also, worrisome, but I also think it's a great opportunity, it is worrisome that essentially AI reproduces the common denominator, the average kind of opinion. And therefore, it is very, I think, unsuited for really breakthrough type of thinking. And that gives us the opportunity to, as humans, not to rely on chatbots in order to come up with new ideas. Because if you rely on chatbots, you are not going to come up very likely with new ideas. You are going to be repeating and moving in a sort of incremental
direction. I don't know if I believe that actually anymore. I think AI has advanced to a point where it can be creative. It goes beyond the data you input in it. It generates its own data. Actually, it learns. I mean, again, I'm not a full expert on this, but I do think it's at the point where it can generate music that is not something that's just a mashup of existing things, art. And even ideas. I mean, for me, the breakthrough on that front was when AlphaZero, there was this was a few years ago actually, that managed to generate a completely new technique at Go to win that had never been experienced. So maybe it's not completely new in the sense that it's defined by a parameter, a set of parameters. It's just exploring areas of the grid that humans had never done. But I mean, is novelty even in humans that different? We're just like advanced bees in some ways. So
we're going to move in very deep waters, but yeah. I'll make 2 points. The first one is that if AI is indeed as efficient in producing innovative thought and thinking, then it means that thinkers are going to be out of business.
Yes.
And artists are going to be out of business. And then we have to ask ourselves what kind of human society we have when people doing these kinds of things are no longer going to be able to operate. Or it is not going to be as effective, in which case, I mean, there's going to be still room for people to operate irrespective of it, but at the same time, the question is, are people's taste going to be affected by this kind of average type of taste that is going to be produced? And eventually also shaping preferences, taste, and things of that sort. And given the power of these companies and their ability to shape taste, the question is, what kind of direction are we moving? So these are questions for which you can imagine both sides of the answer. But again, the best thing we have to judge from the past is the internet. And so if you ask yourself, has the internet in the last 30 years or so really improved, lives and made political systems, behavior, individual relations, has it improved? Is the benefit net? We can see positives, we can see negatives. Overall, I'm not sure that the answer is that the benefit of the internet has been overall, clearly on one side.
So to wrap up, I would say neither a panacea, a great Greek word like the solution for every problem, nor a nuclear bomb, as some predicted, like the doomsday scenario supporters. I would like to wrap up with a strict personal question. How often do you use AI yourselves, and for what? Because I read a survey claiming that most people use it to Google health problems, like my stomach aches, what do I have? Do I have cancer or something like that? Or love stories, like I'm dating this guy and he's not answering, what should I do? What do you use it for? Stathis?
Well, I don't have an AI girlfriend, but a lot of people do, actually, and that is becoming another kind of problem in which people don't interact with other humans at all. I don't use it.
At all?
No.
Wow.
I don't use it.
I use it all the time. I use it for
Me too.
everything, like recipes, work, travel, health. I mean, absolutely everything. Yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
So you can invite us back in 2 years and we'll compare notes on how we've done.
Who's happier?
So thank you very much for this thought-provoking debate, and thank you, the Forum, for having us.
Thank you very much. It was an eye-opening discussion that mainly it's getting back to the ethical, what sort of ethical stance AI is going to have. For instance, is it going to be a system that can be hijacked and be controlled by rich and powerful, so they can turn it into a vehicle through which they circulate their opinions? So our next panel has to do exactly with this billion-dollar question. Can AI be ethical by design? The next panel will examine whether ethical considerations can be integrated into AI development from the outset, or whether there must be enforced through regulation. We're joined by an esteemed group of speakers. Yannis Asael, Greek delegate at the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence at the OECD, Christos Megalou, CEO, Piraeus Bank, and Stelios Virvidakis, Professor Emeritus of Philosophy at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens. Moderating this timely discussion is Lex Paulson, Director of Executive Programs at the UM6P School of Collective Intelligence. Please welcome our panelists.
Good evening, everyone. It is a great privilege to debate and discuss an ethical subject, a mere stone's throw from the headquarters of perhaps one of the world's greatest ethical thinkers, Aristotle and the Lyceum. We have 34 minutes or so to think about this question of, if our goal is to create an ethical artificial intelligence, or artificial intelligence products and tools that respect our ethical values, to what extent can we do that within the tool itself? And to what extent do we need outside actions in the form of regulation, policies, treaties, to achieve that goal of ethical AI? So we decided we would start with a concrete example. So Christos, imagine a young woman comes to the Piraeus Bank with a vision to start a new cafe in Athens, and she is applying for a loan. Now, this is something that happens every day. It happened for many, many years at Piraeus Bank. How is AI changing what the bank is able to do for a customer like her or for other customers? And what do you do currently to ensure that AI that you use adheres to ethical principles?
Lex, thank you very much for this opening question, so I can set the scene from the ground up, and I'm very happy to be here with you and with this excellent panel. Well, the good news is that we use AI in Piraeus Bank, so I have experience to talk to you about this, and the way we look at it is, I would say, customer-centric, because we actually are a bank that we are very close to our customers. We do surveys all the time. We do net promoter scores. We want to be in the loop with how they think about us, and we validate everything that we learn. We try to put them into our models, and we try to have our models having as many data, objective data as possible. So if it is a young woman of color, the model is not gonna, let's say, differentiate or when it comes out with the result. And of course, what we can do, and it may look a little bit, I don't know, maybe unusual, but we try to build our models on the basis of our principles. And the principles for Piraeus Bank is accountability, meritocracy, and transparency. And these are the principles that the whole bank is actually operating on, and I'm very proud to say that. And the way we approach the modeling, and we have been using models now. The latest version of language models, of course, is Gen AI for a few years, is to have these values embedded into the modeling. And how we do that, we monitor results. We make sure that if over time biases are developed, that we correct that. And most importantly is we have a human in the loop. So we make sure that whatever the advice, because that's how we look at it, that is an advice, whatever the advice is from the model, there is a human in the loop who reasons and debates the validity of this answer. And we are using it a lot. We are actually right now spreading it to about 1,000 of our 7,000 people, the co-pilot in its form, but also we are using other forms of AI models. We have a task force of advisors and our own employees that are developing a lot more models along these lines, but we stay very focused and disciplined to our principles: accountability, meritocracy, and transparency.
Can you say a bit more about those 1,000 employees of the bank that are using AI? You have the kind of the macro level view. How are you seeing that AI is helping them do their jobs better?
The way we have actually placed it into the bank is not an instrument to replace people, but is the instrument to help on productivity, in decision-making, in actually giving you a lot more data. For example, our relationship managers that are interacting with clients can use one of these tools to get all the data available for that client, all the data available for the industry, reason on options that or products that could be available for this client on the basis of his financial needs, the cash flow requirements, etc. And we have been looking at this, and we have been using this in the early stages, but we're going to be doing a lot more. We are a total of 7,000 people, so we have a few more to train. But the way we look at it is in order to improve our productivity and not to replace people.
Yannis, building on what Christos has brought our attention to, and using maybe the three values that he has instilled in the bank of accountability, meritocracy, transparency. As someone who builds tools, as a representative of Greece to an international conversation about AI, to what extent do you think that those values could be embedded in the design of a tool?
So that's a very good question, Lex. And maybe to add here as context, I'm also a research scientist at one of the world's leading laboratories designing some of these large language models. Now, taking your question, let's break it into two parts. The first question is that if AI can actually represent those values, and maybe can it be ethical by design? And I think that the term AI, by definition, is a little bit misleading here, because there are multiple models that actually can be defined under that. For example, statistics have existed for hundreds and thousands of years. Like, the statistical models is what evolved to what we so-call today AI. But my field was actually machine learning. And machine learning is defined by statistical models that are most of the time easy to interpret and have been and they're being used from the 90s and even earlier for decision making. However, because they're simple enough, we can understand them, and there's transparency in the way we design the mechanism. That doesn't mean that the mechanism can't be wrong. There are multiple examples of wrong design, but what we're assessing here is the ability. Taking it now to what we've been seeing the last decade, which is the evolution of deep learning and neural networks and these large language models. What are large language models? They're trained on data on all over the internet to predict the next most probable word. Why is that useful? Because by predicting the next most probable word, you can infer the context, and it's a way to teach a model how our world connects and how to represent it. Now, these models are much more complex. They're much more difficult to understand, and we're dealing with some of the state-of-the-art research that we're asking it if it can be transparent and interpretable. And the question is that, the answer to that is that actually it's an open research question. And there is amazing work that is being done towards the direction. To maybe add a clarity point here, is not that these models are opaque. We can totally write down all the equation in a very, very, very long paper. The challenge is that this equation would be very hard to be interpreted by a human.
So when you hear in the media this debate about AI as a black box, that we don't know why the LLM says what it says, what does that make you say in response? Or how would you help clarify that for non-experts?
So I'm a research scientist. By definition, and it's in my contract, that problems are to be solved. So when I see a challenge like that, and it's been a matter of an ongoing discussion for many years, it didn't come up the last 2 years or the last 10 years that people have been discussing it, it's much longer. And I think that there is some amazing work that is happening there, and what we should be doing is, instead of just observing a problem, is that we should start working towards that direction. And there are beautiful examples by multiple companies, by independent laboratories, that they're trying to shed light on how these things work. If we are there yet, clearly not. But I don't think there's a state in this world that we should be satisfied with what we have. By our nature, we should always be seeking for the next step. And I think that the next step here is very large, and we have to definitely move much faster than we already do.
Thank you. Stelios, you teach ethics. You've been teaching ethics for many years. What should someone in your classroom who's trying to study and learn how to think about ethical systems and ethical principles, how has that process of learning about ethics now different in the age of AI? Or should be taught differently and understood differently in the age of this new technology, in your view?
Well, first of all, let me say that I'm very happy to be here and to learn from our friends, because sometimes I'm very much high up in the clouds and I don't see things from the ground up. But
up in cloud cuckoo land up there?
I mean the theory cloud or theory. Now the question is, how is this theory cloud somehow assisted or somehow absorbed by AI systems? And how do we instill or embed this theory cloud or whatever it contains in the systems so that the systems can become useful to us and not dangerous. Now, the students, for instance, as you asked, how do the students learn and what do they learn, should try to think of moral agency and of moral dilemmas. And the question is, can these machines, these systems, help us understand moral dilemmas better by examining all kinds of implications of a dilemma? I mean, take bioethics, take very, very serious situations where you have conflicts of values, where philosophers, bioethicists haven't decided, they are divided about these issues, like euthanasia,
geoengineering, gender.
Yes. Yeah. Now, suppose you feed all this information into, and the data you have from the debates, into the machine, into the system, the deep learning machines, LLMs, and so on. What will you get? I mean, in the past, it seemed to be easier in previous generations of AI systems, because you would say, I want a machine that follows utilitarian views, that is, maximize utility. Or I would like a machine that is Kantian. By the way, in Ian McEwan's book, Machines Like Me, you have a robot which is Kantian and says you never lie. I mean, or if you are Aristotelian, there will be a debate on Aristotelian AI or whatever. There, you don't have just principles, you have virtues. Can you imagine, these systems becoming virtues, and what does this mean? And to go back to the concrete examples that you raised, I think, Yannis said, we have problems to solve. Okay, you have problems to solve and the machine can help you, but what can the machine do for you when you have a dilemma that is of the kind that you were describing? Don't you need the intervention of a human? By the way, I was reassured that there is a human somewhere in the loop to just check what is coming out. Because there is this fear, maybe it's irrational, that these systems, as you said, like black boxes, will evolve and develop in such directions that we cannot control, and maybe they will undermine the values we started with. But even to start with, you said meritocracy. Okay, that's part of your values. Of the values that you have fed into the machine. Well, now there are debates about meritocracy itself. There is a book by Michael Sandel, the famous American philosopher, The Tyranny of Merit. So suppose one of your systems, one day, becoming very wise through having all the data, including Sandel's book, starts questioning meritocracy and saying, no, there are other principles like stronger equality or whatever. So how really do we interact? The machines are becoming a little like us to the extent that they become parts of our form of life. Not only that, but also, as Yannis was saying before, extension. They seem to be like extensions of our intelligence and of our mind. And then, do we still control them?
Well, I mean, the scenario that you describe is, I think, a very positive one if, like the Civic festivals of Athens, the technology brings out in the open moral or ethical dilemmas that are implicit or have been ignored. I think one of the great fears that I see in the debates around AI is that so many of the ethical risks are invisible. So what do you three look at as the perhaps invisible ethical risks that we should be aware of or mindful of when it comes either to the creation of the tool or the regulation of the tool by governments or by business policies? What are your thoughts?
Look, I think there is no doubt that this is an issue that will be debated and discussed for quite some time. I mean, there will be, on the one hand, situations where ethics and the way they are applied are not in the norm sometimes. Other times they will be. The problem is the issue is whether you will have the reasoning and the human, let's say, oversight to actually, at the end of the day, decide what is as simply what is right and what is wrong. I mean, that's at the end of the day where it boils down to on many of those philosophical questions. And of course, there is not a black and white answer. There's not an answer yes or no. There is always a debate around this, but ultimately, the human mind and the humans have to have the last word. We cannot rely on the machine to give us, maybe we can rely on giving us the options and the dilemmas, but we will have to decide at the end of the day what is ethical and what is not, as a human being, not coming out of the machine.
And I'll pick it up from Christos, and looking at this beautiful audience, I'd say that, like, if we ask, by the way, if we ask every single one of you a question about ethics, it's highly probable that we all have different beliefs, and it's highly probable that we don't agree. I think this is the biggest challenge, is that we are asked for the first time in history to put down so many different things on paper and agree on them, on how we want these systems to be steered. Because these systems can definitely be steered, like it's part of the post-training that they receive. But the question is, like, to what values and do we all agree? And there is ambiguity. Like, there is what the true debate is for me. And what I find really interesting from that perspective is that I remember about 10 years ago, actually more, it was 2013, where I started doing my master's thesis on deep learning, and everybody was telling me, oh, this thing is never going to work. And I had to explain to them what I do and how these things work. And now I can have an AI ethics debate with every single person, or at least the majority of them. And there's one thing I really like this, and it's not just because I'm Greek and there are lots of philosophical questions that are brought into the surface again, but I really adore how everybody wants to participate as part of this dialogue, and everybody wants to have an opinion, because this urge is what makes us be more educated about them, attending such events like this one.
So I'm going to, yes, I think that's something worth applauding. Let's take Stelios' metaphor of the clouds and imagine now that we're in a play by Aristophanes. We have the world's political leaders of companies, the designers of the AI tools in an assembly. And the goal is to try to create this dialogue, given the problem or the challenge of ethical plurality, that some people think it's about maximizing utility, other people respecting authority and ancestral rules. You are the ethical expert called in down from the clouds to help create order in this ethical dialogue. What would you do? Stelios.
Well, first of all, there are many ifs there, and there are conditions that must be respected, and I'm afraid, since you brought in politicians and political leaders, that
they do still have some power, unfortunately.
Yes, that I wouldn't trust, them to just first of all, be transparent about their motives. Now, in philosophy, there is this famous German philosopher Habermas, who had this idea, a model of a dialogue, which respects truth, which respects certain conditions for the dialogue to go forward, to deliberate according to certain rules.
Unforced force of the better argument.
Yeah. And what I would like the machine to help me do is sometimes help me understand the structures of the arguments, to what extent they can be judged as valid, but about the premises of the argument,
right.
about the ground values that are going to come into the debate. I'm afraid that the machine by itself cannot do it, and here's where Christos said, what I agree with Christos, that we should go back to human beings. Yeah. But to go to your question, I'm afraid that, look at the world scene today, that the world scene is too chaotic. I mean, sometimes you're not dealing with rational, you feel they are not rational agents. I mean, what are they? They want to maximize profit, they have fears, emotions. Look at world leaders who start a war. How? I mean, the machine presumably doesn't have these shortcomings of strong emotions that somehow prevail over the arguments. And the hope would be that if the machines were counselors of these leaders or moderators of a debate, they would at least help them control these, let's say, moves that they make motivated by strong emotions. But then, on the other hand, you cannot let the machines take it all the way to what? To what goal? What is the common good we're aiming at?
But if you think, Lex, what the professor just said is one of the most optimistic views I heard about the use of AI.
Yes.
Because actually, if you compare, as we see it, right in front of us, some of their human behaviors, reactions, and acts, and you think that they could have been, if they were cancelled by a more rational AI machine, probably they wouldn't have been taken these decisions. That's a very optimistic view for
Can a machine
the future.
predict Donald Trump's reactions?
Because
if it's trained on his Truth Social, then absolutely.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's so erratic
maybe not.
that maybe not.
Yeah.
So I do have a point to maybe raise here as a thought, because it's about Democracy Forum. And my thought is that I think it can be very problematic when we talk about the machines, because it's like giving it an anthropomorphic sense.
Yes.
And
science fiction, like they're
exactly.
out to get us.
And we've all seen so many science fiction movies that we can relate to. But truth to be told, it's a tool, and it's trained to follow a specific objective. So, and that objective has to be quite clear or within the context it's trained. So I think we should be careful as of what we define as AI and how we bring in anthropomorphism in this. And to bring another perspective, because we're talking about AI, I think that the majority of AI is not just this assistance, but it's happening in the lab. And the revolution we see in fields like biology, from nuclear fusion to weather, to climate prediction, to material science in general, like around medicine, I think it's extremely fascinating. And there's no anthropomorphisms there. It's very clearly defined, powerful models to follow specific tasks.
But surely, Yannis, I mean, people who are in the lab all day have blind spots. And you, with a foot in the lab and a foot in this international policy conversation, I'm curious, what is the blind spot you think that the tool builders, the technologists, and the researchers have that maybe the folks with their finger on the pulse of people's fears and hopes in the greater public could complete, and vice versa? What are you talk to politicians all the time in these policy debates. What do the politicians not understand? What are their blind spots when it comes to technology? And how could we kind of work on each other's blind spots in this larger conversation?
Lex, I'm sorry, but you may find me disagree with the idea of people having blind spots. I think we all have different opinions.
Or partial understanding.
And we all come from different backgrounds. And what we truly need, and I know we're fully aligned in this, is we need more multi-stakeholder discussions. I think that maybe to structure it in two levels. The first one is that as citizens, the first thing I would encourage everybody is to familiarize with these tools. Be cautious. It's not that I think we should always be cautious when every change is happening, but we should definitely familiarize and not be technophobic about something that is set in stone that it's going to happen. So the earlier we familiarize, what we see from multiple reports coming in is that the higher the uptake will be for the country or for the individual. Now, taking it at a higher level, I think that we have representatives to represent us in the dialogue because it's very complex matters that need to be thought, and that's why we need multiple stakeholders from all sides, as again in such forums. And I think that Greece is doing an amazing job at representing the country the last few years in such consortiums. Like, we start to see impacts with, for example, some reports coming out from the OECD just a few days ago where We saw that Greece was mentioned all around the place as an example on the AI on using AI in governance. So I think we should participate at an individual level. We should educate ourselves. At the country level, we should participate as much as we can, share knowledge, and learn from the others.
Christos, we're kind of approaching unfortunately, the end of our conversation. You're the leader of one of Greece's largest banks and with a vision over a major sector of the economy. If you could just condense your advice to a business leader seeking to use AI in their business in a responsible and ethical way, what would be your advice?
I would say use it as a tool to help you in understanding better the problem, in actually helping you on your decision making, but you be the ultimate judge of where are you going to be finally moving on the decision. That's the best advice I could give, and that's what I think we are trying to do in the bank when we approach the issue.
And Stelios, all of us have, I think, learned something interesting about the study of ethics from you just in this conversation. If people here in this hall are interested in learning more about how to think ethically, how to understand different ethical systems, what would you recommend that they do? How can we all become more educated about the study of ethics?
You are now talking about regardless of the development, independently of what happens with AI.
I mean, we're in a context where AI is around, so you can factor that in or not. What do you think?
Well, I think there are two main sources that I would draw on. And the one is our ordinary intuitions about things, beliefs that we, well-considered beliefs, but there is also a long history, a pool of ideas regarding our values in the West and also in the East. Now, Confucianism and Eastern systems are being discussed today. So I think you have to bring in both ordinary people's intuitions about things, but also the wisdom of the history of ideas that we can draw on, like Plato, Aristotle, Kant, John Stuart Mill. But again, if you want to abide by the democratic principles that you want to hold on to, I mean, that, as you suggested, be careful with some philosophical ideas. You don't want to think of AI as a philosopher king. Philosopher kings like Plato had in mind can be dangerous in some ways, because they think they know what is the good for all human beings, but we have to be more modest, more democratic, not totally subjectivist. I agree with you that we want a minimal core of principles, and that we can build on the basis of universal dialogue. So universal dialogue could be the goal for deciding about the values that you put at the core, and AI can help you there, at least by allowing you to see all the inferential connections among ideas and intuitions.
And Yanis, finally, for folks here, again, looking to educate themselves and learn more, what would you recommend?
I cannot make a spoiler alert, but maybe something is coming up. I think that what I would encourage everybody is to try these tools. Like I've had beautiful examples from all sorts of disciplines using it for growing their businesses or brainstorming new ideas in entrepreneurship, from improving their writing that many of us are not native, to all sorts of crazy ways somebody can use that. So I would say be creative and always be cautious, but I would urge people to try these things so that they can develop an opinion of how they work, and this opinion will help contribute later in the global dialogue as well.
Well, I'd say in 30 minutes we basically solved the AI ethics debate, haven't we? Please join me in giving a warm welcome and round of applause
to our
panelists.
Thank you for the fascinating questions and answers. We've heard, I think the most important question was how we can just all agree on the set of values that need to be protected, because we have different values. Every human being has different values, so it's a bit difficult to defend them. Also, we have heard about the public sphere and from Habermas, a philosopher who talked about the world of ideas and how to share them in the Parisian cafes in 18th and 19th century. But let's go back. Let's go back to ancient Greece and Aristotle. So, could 2,300-year-old ideas of Aristotle bring useful insights into AI? Do they offer a compelling framework for addressing the challenges and the opportunities? Of course, every Greek would say yes. But let's see what the next panelists are going to say on this very exciting topic. So please welcome our next speakers and jurors for a New York Times style debate. So, you already met Hélène Landemore, Professor of Political Science, Yale University. We're going to have Peter Kirslinger, Professor of Ethics, University of Lucerne, and Visiting Professor in Zurich. Fereniki Panagopoulou, Associate Professor and Director, European Laboratory of Bioethics, Technoethics and Law, Pandion University. Mrs. Stavroula Tsinorema, Professor and Director, Center of Bioethics, University of Crete. Our jurors are going to be Despina Spanou, Haralambos Tsekeris, and Lex Paulson, whom you just met. And the panel is going to be moderated by Stephen Dunbar Johnson, President International, the New York Times Company. A warm welcome for our panelists.
Good evening. How are you all? Good. We're going to need to have some interaction with you all, and I'll explain why in a minute. My name is Stephen Dunbar Johnson, and as President International of the New York Times, it is my honor to MC the first of our two New York Times debates at this year's Athens Democracy Forum. I should point out that Achilles earlier on promoted me to President of the New York Times. I'm President International of the New York Times. We don't like fake news, so we must correct ourselves when there's a bit of false information. I'm delighted, though, to be here. Let's get our brave debaters and jury members out here straight away without further ado. Come on out, wherever you are. Maybe they've fled in fear. Come on out. So, dear audience, I would like to stress this is a debate. It's not a panel discussion. You, the members of our esteemed audience, need to be engaged and to lean in, as our American cousins like to say. So put your phones away and give our debaters your full attention, please, as it is you, dear audience, that will elect the winners. It is you that will participate. The New York Times debate series is intended to create space for balanced, nuanced, and respectful argumentation where we can disagree well. And an attribute that is in short supply in our increasingly polarized world, where inflammatory and entrenched opinions tend to eclipse other perspectives, where it's as important, if not more important, to listen deeply and appreciate where points of views that differ from our own are coming from, and to recognize that often compromise is the foundation of progress. It is these essential principles that motivated us to create the New York Times debate series that has and will continue to convene at important gatherings around the world, and we are delighted to convene here at this august and important gathering. So, ladies and gentlemen, our motion this evening is the basic approach to ethics developed by the 4th century BC Greek philosopher Aristotle offers the most compelling framework for addressing the challenges and opportunities of artificial intelligence today. Now, before I set the rules of the debate, I would like to introduce our debaters and to frame the motion, if I may. So the debaters for the motion, and I'd like you, when I mention your names, to wave so people can recognize you, are, first of all, Hélène Landemore, Professor of Political Science at Yale University, who we heard from earlier. Hélène is over there. And we have Peter Kirschlager, Professor of Ethics, University of Lucerne, and Visiting Professor, ETH Zurich. Peter is over there. I'm getting confused. And the debaters against the motion are Feroniki Panagapoulou, Associate Professor and Director, European Laboratory of Biotech, Technotex and the Law at Pantheon University. Where are you? Over there. And Stavroulou Tsinorema, Professor and Director, Center of Biotech, University of Crete. See over there. So it's up to our debaters to make the case for and against our motion, and it will be up to you, as I said earlier, the audience, to decide using the highly sophisticated New York Times clapometer technology. You need to be loud, which is essential, and this is, I'm really the autocrat in the room, so essentially I will decide which of the motion receives the loudest applause after all the arguments have been made. Okay, so you have to influence me as to what you've heard to convince me of which side has won. I hope that's clear. Please remember, and this is important, part of the ethos of this debate is that our debaters are not necessarily speaking from a place of personal opinion. They are being assessed on their intellectual performance and ability to persuade, and may very well be arguing against their own personal conviction. So please, our wonderful audience, do lean, as I said before, lean into the theatrics of this moment and encourage the debaters as much as you can by clapping and cheering and generally being as noisy as possible when they make a good point. Actually, just to see how good you are, let's have a little warm-up to get you into the swing of things. For those of you who think constructive, respectful debate is essential for a functioning democracy, please clap enthusiastically now. It's not bad. Not bad. Okay, so listen up, everybody. Let me explain the rules. The first pair of debaters from each side of the motion will come up and stand at their respective podiums. The team member from the for team will speak first, followed by the against team. They will remain at the podiums as each one is making their debate. Then the second debaters for each side of the motion will come up to their respective podiums, and again both remain at the podiums to make their case and to listen to the counter arguments. Each speaker has 4 minutes, up to 4 minutes. There is a timer here, and I will be watching that timer very closely. Any debater who goes over the time will be cut off by me. I'm quite strict about this. So please watch the clock as you're going along, or you do risk being cut off. Once everyone has presented their arguments, our esteemed jury, sitting here as they were introduced, will then give their comments. Our jury, let me introduce them actually because they weren't introduced before, are Despina Spanou, the European Commission's Principal Advisor on Cybersecurity in the Department of Technology dealing with AI. Where are you? She's over there. And we have Stefanos Koulaias, who as Professor of Machine Learning at the National Technical National University, I've jumbled that, the National Technical University of Athens. I got that right in the end. And Lex Paulson, where are you, Lex? You're over there. Lex, who you've already heard from, needs no further introduction. Jury members, listen up. You're each going to come on stage. You each have 2 minutes. Now, this is important. It's a slight misnomer to call you a jury because you're not going to judge. What you're going to do is advise. You're going to counsel. You're going to listen attentively to what you've heard, as the audience will be listening attentively. And you will then advise the debaters of any gaps that you think they have missed, any points that you think they should be thinking about. And then, after you have each given your counsel to our debaters, we're going to have a small 4-minute time where you are going to just enjoy yourselves. You can then take your phones out only for 4 minutes if you need to, because our our debaters will then huddle and absorb what they've heard from our jury members, and then they will come back and do their final rebuttals, and they will have 2 minutes each to do so. They will select one of their members to come and give their final rebuttals. Once that is finished, I will come and ask you, audience, to give your verdict on what you've heard through applause. So, I think that is it. I hope that is all clear. It will become clearer as we go along, if not. And I would like to invite our first 2 debaters to come to the podiums, please. Please. So, for the 4 team, you have 4 minutes, you watch the clock, and you can start now.
In the context of our debate, I will try to demonstrate that the Aristotelian ethics offer a valuable insight for the use of AI. Aristotle's ethics help us ask not just what AI can do, but what it should do. It shifts the focus from efficiency to excellence, from automation to aspiration. Aristotle's emphasis on eudaimonia and phronesis aligns with the need for human-centered, context-centered, sensitive AI design. His ethics bring to the forefront the question, what kind of society do we want AI to help build? A central pillar is a human-centered approach to AI. Algorithms may ease our lives, but they can never replace free will. AI development must follow a human-centered approach, respect personal freedom and dignity, promote human well-being, and serve the public interest in order to guide and regulate the healthy and orderly development of the AI industry. Developers, providers, and users of AI are required to prevent and manage potential ethical risks. The promotion of human-centered and trustworthy AI lies in ensuring that applications serve people and are aligned with the fundamental rights and values. In essence, this means prioritizing human needs, values, and ethical principles. At the core of the human-centric theory lies the prohibition of altering the human condition. In this sense, technology is not an end in itself, but a means to advance human progress, addressing real challenges on the basis of human dignity and ethical principles. Therefore, AI must foster the well-being of people, protect their rights and freedoms, and improve their quality of life. Improvement entails tackling social challenges, such as the provision of health, education, environmental protection, and social justice. Emphasis is thus placed on a people-centered perspective, while avoiding a technophobic stance. Ladies and gentlemen, the recent case of a minor suicide with assistance of AI demonstrated that AI must be grounded in the Aristotelian principle of eudaimonia and phronesis. In the case at hand, AI applications should promote individual well-being rather than human marginalization, degradation, or decline. This means that they must be recognized as a tool that supports and inspires people to improve their quality of life by making use of the unique human abilities In this sense, measures must be taken to ensure human well-being to the greatest extent possible. Therefore, if someone exhibits suicidal tendencies, they should automatically receive help to overcome their problem and never be given instructions on how to commit suicide. This is how we should build AI applications. They must be controlled by human beings. The principle of do no harm plays a central role in the sense of protecting the life and health of individuals. In this light, AI tools must not be used in ways that cause actual, potential, or psychological harm or damage. Preventing or averting harm includes preventing both potential, unforeseeable, and malicious harm alike. It follows naturally from the principle that AI is not allowed to provide instruction that could cause someone to commit suicide. Thank you very much.
Very well done. Well, 12 seconds to spare. Well done. Remain at the podium. Let's reset the clock. The clock has been reset. 4 minutes start now.
Ladies and gentlemen, the motion before us suggests that Aristotle's 4th century BC framework of virtue ethics is the most compelling way to think about the challenges of artificial intelligence today. I want to argue against that claim, not because Aristotle's philosophy is irrelevant or wrong, it has lasting insight and is indeed very attractive, but because it's not the framework we most need in this moment. First, ethics is too narrow. Framing AI purely as an ethical question misses the bigger picture. AI is not just about how individuals or companies should behave virtuously, it's about governance, power, and legitimacy. Who decides how AI is used, under what rules, and accountable to whom? Ethics can guide personal conduct, but AI shapes entire societies, maybe the world. To address it, we need political frameworks, not just moral ones. Second, Aristotle politics, if we are going to follow where its ethics lead, is too elitist. Aristotle's virtue ethics is inseparable from a politics of excellence, which excluded women, slaves, and foreigners. It is a framework built on hierarchy and exclusion. Translated into today's debates on AI, it risks reproducing a technocratic or elitist model, where the virtuous few will tell us how to think. But AI governance in the 21st century must be inclusive, participatory, and democratic. Third, the ethical framework itself, if there must be one, should be democratically chosen. Even if we accept the need for ethics, why should Aristotle's virtue ethics be the framework? Why not utilitarianism, Kantian duty, Confucian relational ethics? Or better yet, the frameworks that democratic communities locally collectively choose. The strength of modern democracies lies in pluralism, in allowing citizens, through deliberation and institutions, to decide which moral frameworks guide the technologies that affect us all. To preordain Aristotle as the most compelling is to let a philosopher from antiquity make that choice for us. So, while Aristotle is an important figure in the history of ethics, and his virtue ethics has some merits over competing ethics, his framework is neither the most compelling nor the most democratic guide for AI. What we need is not one philosopher's ethical framework, but an inclusive deliberative process that lets us think and decide together for ourselves. So instead of reaching out for an old book, the way we reach out to ChatGPT today, I think we should engage in a live, vibrant, localized, context-responsive deliberation about our common future. Thank you.
Thank you. You can return to your respective seats. Thank you. Let's call up our next two debaters. And we're going to continue with the for side starting and the against side rebutting. So, the clock has been reset. You have 4 minutes. Are you, everything set? Ready to go? Please go.
Good evening, everyone. I think it would do injustice to Aristotle to say that he is exclusive elitist, or anything else that was kind of splayed out beforehand. Aristotle was the one who defended a participatory way to think. He was the one who has presented us first virtue ethics as an argument that we need Aristotelian ethics for organizing AI in an ethically sound way. Why? Because virtue ethics by Aristotle highlighted the priority we should set in technological progress, namely human flourishing. Human flourishing. We shouldn't strive for efficiency. We shouldn't strive for effectiveness with so-called AI. We should strive for human flourishing. The second argument why Aristotelian ethics is the most compelling ethical school we should rely on organizing so-called AI is because it helps us to understand that we cannot delegate ethics to so-called AI. We shouldn't delegate ethical decision-making to so-called AI. Why? Because virtue ethics gives us a clear idea how much contextualized ethics needs to be. In every concrete encounter with concrete humans, we as humans need to strive for the ethical solution, the ethical right thing. And we learned that from no one else than Aristotle. And let me add that we shouldn't debunk ethical principles and norms which were in place for centuries just because we have some new technological applications. Instead, we should use that wisdom to inform us in finding ethically sound technology-based solutions, including so-called AI. And third and last but not least, Aristotelian ethics is the most compelling ethical theory which needs to apply to AI, because Aristotle was crystal clear that ethics is not enough. Aristotle framed his ethical thoughts by emphasizing that there are some questions in reality, there are issues of such a weight for society that cannot be dealt just by ethics. There needs to be laws in place. And that's exactly what we should learn also from Aristotle, namely that besides ethics by design in the field of so-called AI, we need strict global regulation of so-called AI, and we need firm enforcement of this global regulation of so-called AI. Based on my research in dialogue with Aristotle, I would suggest that we should organize that global regulation in a human rights-based way, and that we should establish an international agency for AI at the UN to enforce that global regulation. Thank you so much for your attention.
The timing was immaculate. You stopped with 1 second left on the clock.
I'm coming
well done.
from Switzerland.
We come from Switzerland, exactly. Very impressive. Madame, 4 minutes. The floor is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen. I am going to share with you some skeptical doubts about particularly the part of the motion that says that Aristotle's framework, not Aristotelian, but Aristotle's, is the most compelling. One question is, what does really compelling mean? It's an evaluative term that needs to be interpreted itself. Allow me to say that we're all heirs of Aristotle. We're all children of Aristotle. But we have to be very careful when we go back to Aristotle, how we do it and why we do it. And in this particular respect, I would not like to be eclectic, and I would not like to be anachronistic. Therefore, why do we go back to Aristotle? We go back to Aristotle because he initiated a very important heritage in ethics and human civilization, a crucial understanding of ethics as practical reason. And he went against his teacher, Plato, who said that ethical knowledge can be reduced to scientific knowledge. A good scientist could be, eo ipso, is a good person. No, says Aristotle. So we have to divide reason, theoretical, scientific, and practical reason, which is autonomous. But then here comes the difficulty and the difficult part. What do we take from Aristotle's grounding of this idea? Because his grounding is based on a very robust, ontological, realist, teleological, metaphysical backing. Is that backing, his physics and his metaphysics, good enough to guide our action in our modernist societies, pluralistic, but also with many contingencies, indeterminacies, antagonisms, and all that? I think not. I think we have to move on from Aristotle to something more to guide human agency. The good for man. For Aristotle, it was absolutely determinate, and it was tied up with his conception of the teleology of nature. We have gone well beyond that. His notion of virtues, yes, of course, virtuous life, we need that. Solidarity, beneficence, and so on and so forth. But to associate it with a determinate, contentful conception of happiness doesn't really apply to our times. Sometimes we have to be virtuous at the cost of our happiness and not because of our happiness. The basic idea, I think, is that we need an autonomous ethics, autonomous in the ancient Greek sense as self-legislation, normative self-legislation, which takes account our autonomous projects, shareable, and in collaboration with all others. We need a new ethics of autonomy, and Aristotle could only be the very starting point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please turn to your seats. So, well done. Very compelling arguments on both sides. Jury members, I'm going to ask you, as I said at the beginning, one by one to come up and give your observations. Again, not your judgment, your counsel of what you heard, what you liked, any gaps that you see. Let's start. Despina, would you like to come up and start? Why not? Please. 2 minutes. You're on the clock. And I will cut you off. I don't normally cut off commissioners or people important, but I am in this role and I'm going to take advantage of it. So you have 2 minutes.
So we heard many things. We heard a lot of theory, a lot of ethics, a lot of Aristotle, a lot about values. We didn't hear how we want this world to operate. Do we want a world that relies on individual, autonomous decisions of each person that has control over something big? We didn't hear a lot of examples. How are we going, you speak of suicide, that was a very good example. But how are you going to explain to the society that in today's world, a pharmaceutical substance, a medical device, takes years before it is authorized and goes through scrutiny before it is in the market, and AI is just out there on its own? How are you going to explain to the society that no, we will rely on autonomous decisions of the people who use AI to multiply cyber attacks and create a mistrust on our digital society, and we'll go analog? Back to Aristotle times. We didn't hear such examples. You spoke of an international agency. Under the UN. Is everybody good in the UN? Did you see what happened last week in the UN discussions? These people will agree on running AI. So, whereas you were all making very compelling arguments, we miss the link to the truth, the link to today's world, and how we're actually going to do that. The Aristotle values apply in all cases anyway. Thank you
very much. Now, remember, debaters, take notes, listen attentively, because this council should help inform your final rebuttals. Okay, Stefanos, would you like to come up in 2 minutes?
Thank you very much for this debate. My background is technical. I'm working with neural networks AI for 40 years. So my questions will be towards, from the technical perspective, how the feasibility or what we're lacking today from a technical perspective in both ways. In the foro, the Aristoteles opinions, I haven't heard if we are targeting AGI, that means general AI, how this fits with the human in the loop, the human-centered. How can the human have control there? Moreover there, if we're speaking about agentic AIs, where agents interact in seconds, how can really human be involved in this decision? This is one question. The second is feasibility. We have heard the market approach, the state approach to AI, the regulatory approach to AI in different continents. How this can be really combined by the virtues and all the well-being that we target through the Aristotle's theory. On the other hand, I have the same questions. That means today, most of the work we have done has been rule-based, knowledge-based. We have not included there any that the outcome should be for the common good, for really democracy, unless we combine the knowledge-based, the rule-based approach with virtue, with combined with what Aristotle has mentioned as the practical, really virtue approach. If we don't do that, then it'll continue splitted. So I think there we need we're speaking about ethics by design. So everything should be in the modeling. So in any case, so I think these are good.
You're on. You've just hit the time, but thank you very much. Lex, the floor is yours. The clock has been reset for 2 minutes.
I'll jump right to the chinks in the armor of both sides. Of the four side, you simply have to address the biggest argument against Aristotle, that he believed in natural hierarchies and found the domination of women by men, the domination of the enslaved by the free to be completely normal and acceptable. Without dealing with those, I think, ethical glaring subjects and topics, we can't fundamentally accept Aristotle as a guide for ethical behavior in the 21st century. To the against side, you seem to think, Helene, that it's possible to begin a democratic deliberation essentially from scratch with no common ethical foundation. Well, you know as well as I that every democratic community must have some common starting point when it comes to values, when it comes to basic principles that guide the deliberation that's going to take place. If not, then how is a democratic decision-making possible? And you didn't address any of the alternatives, and as we know, the two major alternatives of ethical principles, being Kantian ethics and utilitarianism, suffer from the same problem of searching for algorithmic answers to ethical dilemma, whereas Aristotle starts from the idea that human flourishing is something everyone can agree that we want, that we don't always know what the proper definition in the situation is, and so versus the other ethical systems gives a much better, more open-ended, more flexible set of thinking tools to think through dilemmas. The ethics of autonomy, aren't we fragmented and individualized enough already? Doesn't Aristotle help us reconnect with our basic identity as a politikon zoon, to want to live in communities, to think communally, and to agree that flourishing ultimately is the most important value of all? Thank you.
Wonderful. So our jury members have added more flesh to the bone which you are going to chew on over the next 4 minutes. Debaters. We're going to set, well, the clock is set. I'm not going to start it yet. You're going to convene, you're going to listen, and then you will decide which one of you is going to come up and do the final rebuttal, and the final rebuttal will be for 2 minutes. So we're going to start the 4 minutes. Audience, please stay engaged, because you're going to come back, but we're going to have a 4-minute rest, absorb what you've heard, and be respectful for our debaters when they come back. So, 4 minutes, starting now. Excellent. Very good, very good. One. You have to decide which one of you two. Yeah. Excellent. Hello. How are you? Nice to see you. Oh, you have a video? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You can have what video of him on the beach? One minute. Okay, have we decided which of the two of you are going to, which teams are going to come up? Please come up to the podium, both. So you both have 2 minutes. I'm going to swap it out, so we're going to have the against side start, okay? So you have 2 minutes.
I thought it was 4 minutes.
No, you have 2 minutes.
Only 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Oh, dear me.
2 minutes.
Right.
Okay. And I will cut you off after 2 minutes.
Oh.
So, 2 minutes starting now.
Who's going to start? Me?
You.
Right.
I'm giving you another 5.
Allow me first to clear up a confusion about the notion of autonomy. We here in Greece know the Greek word autonomia, self-legislation, enomos, to ourselves. This is the ancient Greek notion of autonomia, and that's the one I alluded to when I said an ethics of autonomy. Who took this notion and made it from a political notion to a moral one? Immanuel Kant, a universalist ethics from the 18th century. That's important. So, autonomy is not mere sheer individual choice. It's acting on principles. It's principled, rational choice, law-like, shareable principles. We need those principles. Regarding the common good, define the common good. The common good for whom? The Germans, the Chinese, the Africans? How are we going to go about sorting out this substantive notion? Don't we better need shareable principles? Principles which can be valid from the standpoint of all, Africans, Asians, us, everybody. Let's try and work hard to work on such a framework which will incorporate insights from Aristotle, from the huge traditions of the past, including the Enlightenment tradition. Yes, we need that. And of course, AGI. We will be very thoughtless beings to proceed with this visions, because if we ever get there, of course AGI will have its own rules, its own ethics, and we don't know what that's going to be. So lastly, I think we need a framework which will incorporate ethics, the law, regulation, politics, but it will stem from the participation of all agents, of all human beings around the globe. More participation is my last word.
More participation. Thank you. I gave you a few more seconds because I'm a nice gentleman, but also because of the confusion at the beginning. But you have 2 minutes, and starting now.
Ladies and gentlemen, we heard more participation. Afterwards, you're going to decide who is going to win this debate. Where does this democratic, participatory method come from? Aristotle framed the idea of politeia, that we should all participate in these decision-making processes. And you were right that Aristotle didn't think everyone in the right way. That's his weakness. We have to crystal clearly to admit that. But besides that, we still live from that heritage of finding together a solution, thanks to Aristotle. I want to live in a world where an 11-year-old boy doesn't commit suicide thanks to advice of a so-called AI. And in order to make sure that this doesn't happen again, we need to have an ethical framework informed by virtue ethics with the clear goal of fostering human flourishing to make sure that this doesn't happen again to any human being. And I'm optimistic, in contrary to one of our jurors. Can you remember when the International Atomic Energy Agency was built? Helping us to survive nuclear technologies as humanity and as planet. It was during the Cold War. Geopolitical, not a time of big harmony. So I'm optimistic that at this point in time, we are able as humanity to establish an international agency for database systems, IDA, at the UN, to make sure that no more children will commit suicide because of the advice of so-called AI. Thank you so much for your time.
It takes a lot of courage to come up and debate these things, so Let's all give them all of our debaters, please give them a round of applause. You can go back to your seats. The time has come for your verdict, audience. Are you ready? So, having heard the case made by the FOR team that the basic approach to ethics developed by the Greek philosopher Aristotle offers the most compelling framework for addressing the challenges and opportunities of AI today. If you believe that, please clap now. Okay. Interesting. For those of you having heard the arguments of the against team, that the basic approach to ethics developed by the Greek philosopher Aristotle does not offer the most compelling framework for addressing the challenges and opportunities of AI today, please clap now. Often in these debates, I am left with to have to make the decision to arbitrate, but there is a clear winner. Congratulations, the against team. Jury members, thank you so much for your contribution. I think we all were edified by your compelling advice and commentary. I'd like to thank the folks at the Athens Democracy Forum for giving us this platform, and particularly I'd like to thank you, the audience, for your participation. It's it's great to have you here. And again, the reason why the New York Times does these debates is to have this idea of respectful dialogue, listening to both sides. These are skills that are needed desperately in today's world. So thank you very much for participating.